Have you ever had your entire family laugh at you right in your face? I have. It happened on the day we read my grandmother's will. My name is Lauren Hill. I'm 32, and I've worked as a financial analyst in Portland for the last 7 years. I pay my bills on time. I've never asked my family for anything, even when I had to juggle 2 jobs and night classes to finish my degree. I thought that meant something. I thought it would count for something when Grandma Alice passed away. We all gathered in a small conference room at the law offices of Morris and Stein. The rain was coming down hard outside, tapping against the tall windows while the smell of old coffee lingered in the carpet. My father Greg was sitting stiff in a gray suit that didn't quite fit his shoulders anymore. Beside him was my stepmother Cheryl, her bright red nails tapping her phone screen as if she couldn't wait for this to be over. My half-brother Brandon, 27, wearing a baseball cap indoors and scrolling TikTok, didn't even look up when I walked in. Aunt Carol was there too, sitting quietly in the corner, clutching a tissue like she might cry again. The lawyer Mr. Stein adjusted his glasses, cleared his throat, and started reading the will. My heart pounded as he listed the house in Salem, the Ford truck, and the savings account, all left to my father and Brandon. Brandon let out a low whistle when he heard about the savings account, and Cheryl smirked as if she had won some small battle. Then Mr. Stein paused, glanced at me, and read the next line. To my granddaughter Lauren, I leave $1 and all my love. A single dollar. Brandon snorted so hard he nearly choked. Cheryl turned to Greg and whispered something, and they both chuckled under their breath, not even trying to hide it. Aunt Carol shot me a look, her lips pressed tight, eyes soft with pity. My ears burned and the room felt too small, too bright, like I couldn't breathe. I didn't say a word. I didn't ask why. I just nodded, my throat tight, while everyone else in that room seemed to get exactly what they wanted. They acted like it was nothing, like I was nothing. The lawyer handed my father the keys to the Salem house and the documents for the truck. Brandon already started planning out loud how he would turn the basement into a game room, laughing about how some people should have been nicer if they wanted a bigger piece of the pie. I stood up quietly, smoothing the wrinkles in my black skirt. My hand trembled, but I kept my chin up. I walked out into the rain without looking back, letting the cold drops hit my face, blending with the tears I refused to let fall in front of them. The drive back to my apartment felt endless. My phone buzzed with a text from Aunt Carol telling me not to take it personally, that Grandma probably had her reasons. I didn't respond. I spent that night lying awake, replaying every conversation I'd ever had with Grandma Alice, trying to understand how I could mean so little to her in the end. 3 days later, I was sitting at my kitchen counter, staring at my unpaid utility bills when my phone rang. It was Mr. Stein. Lauren, he said, his voice calm but urgent. Your grandmother left a matter to discuss privately with you. She asked me to contact you 3 days after the will reading. Can you come in this afternoon? I clutched the phone, the room spinning around me, wondering what could possibly be left for me after that humiliating dollar. I took a deep breath, nodded to no one, and told him I would be there. I could still hear Brandon's laugh ringing in my ears as I pulled my coat tighter around me, standing by the elevator. The door opened and I stepped inside, pressing the button with a shaky finger. My reflection in the polished metal doors stared back at me. Eyes red, jaw clenched so hard it hurt. On the way down, I heard the muffled voices of my family in the hallway talking about dinner plans and what they would do with the house in Salem, the car, the money. Cheryl's laughter cut through the hallway, sharp and sweet like poison. I could almost hear her saying she got exactly what she deserved. The elevator dinged, and I stepped into the lobby, the rain outside hitting the glass in thin, cold streaks. I pulled my hood up and pushed open the heavy glass door, the wet wind smacking me in the face, waking me up. My car was parked at the far end of the lot, and with every step I felt my shoes soak through the cold, creeping into my toes. Sliding into the driver's seat, I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. My breaths came out in short, hot puffs, fogging up the windshield. I wiped it with my sleeve, leaving a smudge that blurred the lights of the street. I remembered the way Grandma Alice used to hold my hand in the grocery store, telling me to always check the price before buying anything, how she would send me cards on my birthday with $10 bills tucked inside, telling me to spend it wisely. I thought about the summer I spent painting her fence, how she brought out lemonade in mason jars, her smile warm as she watched me work. Did all of that mean nothing? I started the engine, the wipers squeaking across the glass, and pulled out of the lot. The roads were slick, the city lights reflecting off the puddles like broken glass. My phone buzzed again. Aunt Carol. Lauren, I just wanted you to know I'm here if you need to talk, her voicemail said, her voice trembling a little. Your grandma loved you in her own way. In her own way. I clenched my jaw, biting back the words I wanted to scream. $1 and all her love. That's what her love was worth. When I got home, I kicked off my wet shoes and stood in the middle of my tiny living room, staring at the stack of bills on the counter. Rent, electricity, car insurance. I pulled off my coat, letting it drop to the floor, and sank onto the couch, letting the silence fill the room. The heating clicked on, the warm air humming through the vents, but it didn't chase away the cold inside me. I grabbed the old photo of Grandma Alice from the shelf, her smile so genuine, so kind, standing in front of her garden. I wanted to throw it, to smash the frame, but I couldn't. I pressed it against my chest, instead closing my eyes, trying to find an answer in her memory. But there was nothing. All I could see was Brandon's smirk, Cheryl's satisfied glance, Dad's silence as he signed the papers, acting like it was just business. My family saw me as the one who didn't need help, the one who would figure it out on her own. Maybe they were right. But that night, as I lay in bed, the rain tapping against my window, I promised myself one thing. I would not let that single dollar define my worth. The next morning, I woke up before the sun came up, the cold air in my apartment making me shiver as I swung my legs off the bed. I wrapped myself in a blanket and sat by the window, watching the rain-soaked street below, wondering how everything could feel so normal outside, while my world felt like it was splitting open. I made coffee, the bitter smell filling the small kitchen, grounding me for a moment. I checked my bank account, the numbers low, almost mocking me. $1. I whispered it out loud, letting the words taste like metal on my tongue. Later that day, I drove to my job downtown. The office building was already alive with lights, people moving around with coffee cups, checking emails, and planning meetings. I walked to my desk, logging into my computer like it was just another day, but it wasn't. Maya walked over, holding her cup of tea, her eyes scanning me. You okay? She asked. I'm fine, I said, forcing a smile. You don't look fine, she said, sitting on the edge of my desk. Is it about your grandma? I hesitated. I didn't want to talk about it, but Maya had been my friend since college. She was the one who stayed up with me during late-night study sessions, who covered for me when I had car trouble, who knew the way I tapped my pen when I was nervous. She left me $1, I said, my voice flat. Maya's eyebrows shot up. What, $1? Why would she do that? I shrugged, pretending it didn't sting. She had her reasons, I guess. Maya shook her head, setting her tea down. Lauren, that's not right. You were the one always visiting her, helping her with groceries, checking on her. You didn't deserve that. I know, I said softly, looking at my computer screen, the numbers blurring as my eyes burned. She reached out, squeezing my hand before standing up. You let me know if you need anything, okay? I nodded, watching her walk away, leaving me alone with my thoughts. The day dragged on, meetings and emails blending together. During lunch, I walked to the small park across the street, sitting on a wet bench, letting the misty rain settle on my jacket. I thought about the day we buried Grandma Alice, how I stood there with a rose in my hand, thinking about the cinnamon rolls she used to bake, the way she would hum while tending her garden. She had loved me. I knew that. So why $1? I closed my eyes, letting the cold air numb my skin. The wind moved through the trees, rustling the leaves, reminding me that the world kept moving even when your heart felt stuck. When I got home that evening, I changed into sweatpants and pulled my hair back, trying to shake off the heavy feeling sitting in my chest. I opened my fridge half empty and grabbed a yogurt, sitting at the kitchen counter with the unpaid bills stacked beside me. My phone buzzed again, the screen lighting up with Aunt Carol's name. Hi honey, she said when I answered. I just wanted to check on you. I'm okay, Aunt Carol, I said, my voice tired. I know it must feel strange, but your grandma loved you, she said, her voice soft. I know, I repeated, but the words felt empty. She sighed. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. Thanks, I whispered, hanging up. I sat there staring at the bills, thinking about how $1 wouldn't even buy a cup of coffee. $1 while they got the house, the truck, the money. My family had laughed at me, acted like I didn't matter, like I wasn't worth more than a cheap joke at a lawyer's office. I pulled out Grandma's photo again, tracing her smile with my thumb, wishing she could tell me why. Then, just as I was about to go to bed, my phone rang. Unknown number. Lauryn Hill, a deep voice said on the other end. Yes, I said, sitting up straighter. This is Robert Stein, your grandmother's attorney, he said. There's a matter regarding your grandmother's estate that she instructed me to share with you 3 days after the will reading. I gripped the phone tighter, my heart pounding in my chest. What is it? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. It would be better if we discussed this in person, he said. Can you come to my office tomorrow afternoon? I swallowed, my mind racing, wondering what else could possibly be left for me after that single humiliating dollar. Yes, I said, my voice steady. I'll be there. I hung up, staring at my reflection in the dark window, the city lights twinkling behind me, wondering if this was the moment everything would finally change. Have you ever been in a situation like this? Share in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. I thought it was over. I thought that single dollar was the end of it all. I was wrong. It was a Thursday morning when my phone rang at work. I was finishing a report for a client, the numbers blurring as I tried to focus, my coffee already cold beside me. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. Lauryn Hill, I answered, forcing my voice to sound steady. Miss Hill, this is Harold Gibbons. I was your grandmother, Alice's attorney, the voice said, calm but firm. My stomach tightened, the memory of that humiliating will reading hitting me like a slap. Yes, I said quietly, pushing away from my desk, so no one would overhear. There's a matter regarding your grandmother's estate that she requested I discuss with you privately 3 days after the will reading, he continued. My hand gripped the phone, my pulse loud in my ears. What kind of matter? I asked. I would prefer to explain in person, he said. Can you come to my office today? I glanced around the office, people moving with purpose, the sound of printers and quiet conversations filling the space. I swallowed hard. Yes, I said. I can come during lunch. Good, he said. I'll see you at noon. He hung up, leaving me holding the phone, staring at the gray carpet. Maya walked past, giving me a curious look, but I shook my head, letting her keep walking. The morning crawled by my mind, unable to focus on anything but the call. What could possibly be left for me after that dollar? A part of me wanted to ignore it to protect myself from more disappointment, but something deep inside whispered that Grandma Alice wouldn't have asked for this without a reason. At 11:30, I grabbed my coat and walked out, the cold Portland air waking me up as I crossed the street to the parking garage. I drove in silence, the windshield wipers brushing away the drizzle, each movement steady, almost comforting. Harold's office was in an older brick building downtown, the kind with creaky floors and the scent of old wood and paper. The receptionist led me down a narrow hallway to a small office where Harold, a man in his mid-50s with silver hair and kind but serious eyes, stood to greet me. Miss Hill, thank you for coming, he said, shaking my hand firmly before gesturing for me to sit. What is this about? I asked, my voice low. He sat across from me, folding his hands on the dark wood desk. Your grandmother left instructions for me to contact you privately, he said. She asked me to give this to you. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a small cream-colored envelope with my name written in Grandma's careful handwriting. Seeing it made my throat tighten, and for a moment I couldn't move. I'll give you a moment, he said, standing and stepping outside. I held the envelope, tracing the letters of my name, remembering how she would write me notes on yellow sticky pads, leaving them on the fridge when I stayed with her during the summer. I took a breath and opened it, unfolding the letter with trembling hands. My dearest Lauren, it began. If you are reading this, it means Harold has kept his promise. I am sorry for the pain you felt during the will reading. I know it must have hurt, but there was a reason I could not explain then. I blinked, tears threatening, but I forced myself to keep reading. You see, I discovered something that changed everything. I found out that your father and Cheryl had been taking the money I sent to help you during college. Money meant for your tuition, your books, your living expenses. They told me you never needed it, that you were fine, but I saw your struggle, Lauren. I saw you working late nights, skipping meals, and I knew something was wrong. I had to find a way to protect what was meant for you. My hands shook as I held the letter, Grandma's words sinking into me, a weight and a relief all at once. I have set up something for you, something that cannot be touched by anyone else. I looked up, the office quiet around me, the letter still warm from my hands. I didn't know what she meant yet, but I knew that my grandmother had not forgotten me. She had not left me with just $1. She had left me something else. Something I needed to find the courage to face. The door opened and Harold stepped back and closing it softly behind him. He looked at me, waiting, giving me space to finish reading. I folded the letter carefully, placing it on my lap, my fingers brushing over Grandma's handwriting one last time before I looked up. What did she mean? I asked, my voice low. Harold sat down, his chair creaking slightly, and took a deep breath. Your grandmother discovered the funds she sent to help you during college were being intercepted by your father and Cheryl, he said, his eyes meeting mine with a steady calm. She was heartbroken, Lauren, but she also knew you would need support one day. I nodded slowly, letting the words settle in the room like dust. She set up an international investment account held in a trust under your name. Harold continued, sliding a thin folder across the desk toward me. It is with a private bank in Switzerland. She wanted it protected from any interference, and she wanted you to receive it when she passed. My heart pounded, the words not fully sinking in. Switzerland, I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. Harold nodded. She was meticulous, Lauren. She worked with financial advisors and ensured the account complied with all reporting laws here. The IRS has been informed yearly and taxes were paid. This is entirely legal. I picked up the folder, opening it with trembling hands. Inside were documents with my name, the bank's name in Geneva, and a summary of the account. My eyes scanned the numbers, my breath catching in my throat. $3.5 million. I closed the folder quickly, holding it to my chest, my mind spinning. How? I whispered. How did she do this? Harold leaned back, his hands folded in front of him. She started small. Some investments she made decades ago grew over time. She lived simply, but she was wise with her money. She never touched these funds. She wanted them to be yours and yours alone. I felt the room tilt for a moment, the weight of everything pressing on me. Why didn't she just tell me? I asked, my voice cracking. She didn't want this to change who you are, Harold said gently. She wanted you to build your life, to find your own strength first. She trusted you would know what to do with it when the time came. I looked out the window, the clouds heavy over the Portland skyline, the drizzle painting the glass in thin streaks. My reflection looked back at me, older than I remembered, tired but holding something new. Hope, maybe. What do I have to do now? I asked. You will need to travel to Geneva to finalize the transfer, Harold said. The bank requires your presence along with identity verification and your signature to complete the process. My breath shook as I exhaled, gripping the folder tighter. When I asked, as soon as you're ready, he said. I will coordinate with their legal department to prepare the documents for your arrival. I nodded, standing up slowly, feeling the weight of the moment settle into my bones. Harold stood as well, offering his hand again. Your grandmother loved you deeply, Lauren, he said. She wanted you to have the freedom to live your life, to help others, and to never be limited by what others took from you. I shook his hand, clutching the folder in my other arm, and left the office, stepping back into the cold air, the drizzle turning into rain as I walked to my car. Sitting in the driver's seat, I let out a long breath, the fog from my lungs clouding the windshield. I closed my eyes, Grandma's words echoing in my mind. She saw me. She believed in me. And now it was my turn to decide who I would become with the gift she fought to protect for me. As I started the engine, the rain drumming harder on the roof, one thought pulsed through me. I would have to go to Switzerland. I would have to face this new reality, this unexpected freedom, and the choices that would come with it. But as I pulled out of the parking lot, I couldn't help but wonder. Was I ready? Would you have been ready if you were me? What would you have done? Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. What would you do if you found out you had a secret fortune, but you had to leave everything to claim it? I stared at my laptop screen, the confirmation email glowing back at me, the words "Flight to Geneva confirmed," pulling me into a reality. Wasn't sure I was ready for. I spent that night packing my small black suitcase, folding clothes with shaky hands while the rain hit my window in soft, steady waves. Each shirt I folded felt like a piece of the life I was leaving behind, even if just for a week. I texted Maya telling her I needed to take some personal time off. "Everything okay?" she wrote back, her typing dots blinking as I hesitated. "Yeah," I lied. "Just something I need to take care of." She sent back a thumbs up, but I could almost hear her voice in my head telling me she knew I was hiding something. The next morning, I called into work speaking to my supervisor Tom. "Take whatever time you need," he said, his voice warm but curious. "Just let us know when you're back." I hung up, taking a breath, letting the quiet of my apartment settle around me. That afternoon, my phone rang, Dad's name flashing across the screen. I almost didn't answer, but something made me swipe to accept. "Lauren," he said, his voice too cheerful. "We're having a small get-together this weekend at the Salem house. Thought you'd want to see it." I could hear Cheryl in the background laughing, telling him to ask if I was bringing dessert. "I can't," I said, keeping my voice calm. "I have plans." There was a pause long enough that I could hear the television in the background. "Plans?" he repeated, his tone shifting. "Yes," I said. "I'm sorry, Lauren, it's family," he said, his voice lowering. "I know," I said, "but I can't." I hung up before he could say anything else, my hand shaking as I placed the phone on the counter. At the airport, I moved through security, clutching my passport, my stomach twisting with each step toward the gate. I found my seat by the window, buckling in as the plane filled with the hum of conversations and rolling suitcases. As the engines roared to life, I closed my eyes, remembering Grandma Alice's voice, her hands in the garden soil, her soft laugh as she told me money is freedom, Lauren. It's how you help others, how you live without fear. The plane lifted the ground, falling away, the city shrinking beneath the clouds. I leaned my head against the cold window, the clouds reflecting the sunrise in shades of orange and pink. The hours passed in a blur of engine hums and meal carts clinking down the aisle. I stared at the small screen in front of me, the map showing the plane inching closer to Switzerland. When we landed in Geneva, I stepped off the plane into crisp air that smelled like rain and cold stone. The airport was clean and efficient, signs in French and English guiding me through customs. As I walked through the arrival gates, I saw a woman holding a sign with my name on it. "Miss Hill?" she asked, her voice calm, her accent soft. "Yes," I said, pulling my suitcase closer. "I'm Petra Muller," she said, shaking my hand firmly. "Welcome to Geneva." She led me outside, the air cool against my face as we walked toward a black sedan waiting at the curb. As we drove through the city, I saw the lake, the mountains rising in the distance, the streets lined with shops and cafes. Petra glanced at me in the rearview mirror. "Your grandmother was a remarkable woman," she said. "She made careful choices to protect what was meant for you." I nodded, gripping the strap of my purse, letting the city blur past the window as we drove toward the bank where my life was about to change. The car pulled up in front of a limestone building with tall windows and polished brass handles that caught the morning light. Petra stepped out first, opening the door for me as I grabbed my small bag and took a deep breath. Inside, the marble floors echoed under my shoes as we walked through a quiet lobby past a security checkpoint where I handed over my passport for scanning. The guards nodded, waving us through to a private elevator that required Petra's badge to operate. We rode up in silence, the numbers ticking higher, my heart pounding with every floor we passed. I wiped my sweaty palms on my jeans, staring at my reflection in the mirror-polished doors. The elevator opened to a quiet hallway lined with paintings and warm lighting, the air cool and clean. Petra led me to a glass-walled conference room with a long table, a view of Lake Geneva stretching beyond the window. "Please have a seat," she said, her voice calm. I sat down, gripping the armrests as Petra placed a leather folder in front of me. She opened it carefully, sliding over several documents with my name printed neatly across the top. "Your grandmother invested wisely over the last 40 years, Petra said, sitting across from me, folding her hands. She chose stable, dividend-paying stocks, index funds, and utility companies that grew steadily." I nodded, my eyes scanning the numbers, the charts, the neat lists of investments that had turned into something I could barely comprehend. Petra continued, her voice steady. "Your grandmother wanted this money to remain untouched until she passed, ensuring it would be safe from any outside claims." I swallowed, my mind flashing back to nights when I skipped dinner to pay rent, the second job I worked during college, the way I counted every dollar, never knowing she had been building this for me. "How much is there?" I asked, my voice shaking slightly. Petra gave a small, understanding smile. "As of last month, it is valued at $3.6 million. I let out a small breath. I didn't know I was holding my head spinning. 3.6 million. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the weight of that number sink in, the quiet of the room pressing in around us. Petra let me process in silence before she spoke again. "Your grandmother's wish was for you to have financial freedom, but also to understand the responsibility that comes with it." I looked up, meeting Petra's calm, kind eyes. "What do I need to do now?" Petra opened another folder, sliding over a pen. "To transfer the account to your full control, we will need your signatures, identification, and biometric confirmation." She paused, looking at me carefully. "But there is one more thing." I felt my pulse quicken, my fingers tightening around the edge of the folder. "What is it?" I asked. Petra glanced at the document, then back at me. "Before we proceed, there is a personal letter your grandmother left with us, containing a request she wanted you to consider before accepting this inheritance." She reached into her bag and pulled out a cream-colored envelope just like the one Harold had given me back in Portland. My name was written in her careful handwriting, each letter familiar, each loop a memory. I reached for it slowly, my hand hovering, before taking it, the paper soft under my fingers. Petra stood, giving me privacy, walking to the window to look out over the lake. I stared at the envelope, my heart pounding, wondering what she could have written, what she could possibly ask of me now. The room felt impossibly quiet, the weight of her last request hanging in the air between us. I wasn't sure if I was ready to read it, but I knew I had to. "Would you have opened that letter right then if you were me? Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this." This request was not a number. It was a mission. I held the envelope in my hands, the weight of it pressing into my palms as I sat in that quiet room overlooking Lake Geneva. The air smelled like rain and something warm from the cafe downstairs. Petra stood by the window, giving me space, her back turned as she stared out at the water. I opened the envelope slowly, the paper crackling as I pulled out the letter. Her handwriting was neat, familiar, each loop and curve a reminder of the grocery lists she would leave on the fridge when I stayed over during the summer. "My dearest Lauren," it began. "If you are reading this, then you have found the courage to claim what I saved for you. I want you to know I have never doubted you. I saw your strength, your kindness, your patience, even when life was unfair to you." I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes, but I blinked them back, taking a deep breath. "This money is yours, but it comes with a purpose. I want you to live freely, to travel, to build the life you have always wanted. But I also want you to remember what money truly is. It is not power. It is not control. It is a tool, a way to help others who need a hand just like you once did." She wrote about the years she watched me struggle, the way I worked 2 jobs while attending school, the nights I skipped meals to pay for textbooks. She knew. She had seen it all, even when I thought I was hiding it. I kept reading, the words cutting deep, leaving warmth in the wounds they opened. "I know your father and Cheryl have hurt you. I saw them take what was meant for you, and I could not stop them then. But I could ensure you would have something that was truly yours when you were ready, when you had already proven to yourself that you could stand on your own." My breath shook as I exhaled, the paper trembling in my hands. "Help others, Lauren. Help women who need to find their freedom, who need to learn what you already know. Use this money to live, but also to lift." I pressed the letter to my chest, closing my eyes, letting the tears fall, this time warm against my skin. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the air system and the distant sound of the city below. A knock at the glass door made me look up. Petra stood there, waiting, her expression gentle. "Are you ready?" she asked softly. I wiped my face, folding the letter carefully and slipping it back into the envelope. I stood holding it close to me as I walked to her. "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "I'm ready." She nodded, guiding me back to the conference table where the documents were laid out. She explained each page, the process of transferring the funds into an American account if I wished, how the taxes had already been reported, how everything was clean, protected. I signed where she indicated, my hand firm, the pen gliding across the thick paper. Each signature felt like a promise, not just to her but to Grandma Alice and to myself. When we finished, Petra closed the folder, her hands folding over it. "Your grandmother trusted you," she said. "She believed you would use this well." I nodded, the weight of the moment pressing on me, but also lifting something heavy off my shoulders. "I won't waste it," I said quietly. Petra smiled, a small, proud curve of her lips. "I know." As I stepped out of the building into the cold Geneva air, I looked up at the gray sky, the clouds shifting as a thin ray of sunlight broke through. I didn't know exactly what would come next, but I knew one thing. I was going home. And I was going to build something new. I pulled my coat tighter around me, taking one last look at the building behind me before walking toward the car waiting at the curb, the city alive around me, the future waiting. On the flight back to Seattle, I sat by the window, the glow of the overhead light catching the edge of Grandma's letter in my bag. The hum of the engines was steady, a white noise that let my mind drift as clouds moved beneath us. I thought about the mission she left me. It was bigger than the money, bigger than the struggle I had carried for so many years. It was about freedom, not just for me, but for women like me who needed a hand to stand on their own. The seatbelt sign clicked on as we began to descend, the lights of the city coming into view, dots of yellow and white against the dark. My heart beat faster, the reality of returning home pressing into me. At the baggage claim, I pulled my small suitcase from the carousel, the airport loud with announcements and rolling carts. I stepped out into the cold Seattle air, the familiar scent of rain on concrete grounding me. When I got back to my apartment, I stood in the doorway for a long moment, taking in the quiet, the stack of unpaid bills on the counter, the small space that had been my world for years. I set my bag down, taking off my shoes, letting my feet feel the worn carpet. I made tea, the warmth of the mug in my hands, steadying me as I sat at the table, the letter from Grandma in front of me. I read it again, tracing the words, letting her voice fill the silence. Help others. Live freely. The next morning, I called Maya. She picked up on the second ring. "Lauren," she said, her voice bright but cautious. "You're back." I said, taking a breath. "Can we talk?" "Of course," she said. "Come by the cafe." We met at a small coffee shop near the office, the scent of roasted beans and cinnamon filling the air. Maya was already there, her laptop open, her dark hair pulled into a bun. She looked up when I walked in, her eyes scanning my face. "You look different," she said, closing her laptop. "I feel different," I said, sitting down. She waited, letting me find the words. "I've been given something," I said slowly. "Something that changes everything." Maya's eyebrows lifted, but she stayed quiet. "My grandmother left me an inheritance," I said. "But she asked me to use it for something bigger than myself." Maya's eyes softened, her hand reaching across the table to squeeze mine. "Lauren, that's incredible," she said. I nodded, swallowing the tightness in my throat. "I want to help women who need it. Women who are trying to build a life, who just need a chance." Maya smiled, her eyes bright. "That sounds like you." We sat there for a moment, the hum of conversations around us, the clink of cups on saucers, the warmth of the cafe wrapping around us like a promise. When I left the cafe, the air was crisp, the sky a pale blue, the city alive with movement. I walked to my car, the streetlights blinking above me, the sounds of traffic mixing with the footsteps of people rushing to their destinations. I knew I wasn't going to tell my father or Cheryl about the money. It wasn't their business, and I didn't owe them that part of me. They had laughed at me, counted me out, and turned their backs when I needed them most. Now I was going to build something they could never touch. I opened the door to my car, sliding into the seat, the leather cold against my skin. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror, the woman looking back at me, stronger than I had ever seen her. I didn't know every step I would take, but I knew the direction I was headed. As I started the engine pulling away from the curb, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. But I didn't know then that coming home with this secret would turn my quiet life upside down. Have you ever been in a situation like this? Share in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. Not everyone is happy when you suddenly have money, especially your own family. When I got back to Seattle, the rain felt different on my skin. I moved out of my tiny apartment, signing a lease for a small but bright one-bedroom in Capitol Hill, close enough to the coffee shops I loved, far enough to feel like a new start. I quietly transferred part of the money into a clean American account, working with Harold and Petra to ensure every tax and form was filed correctly. I paid off my student loans in full, watching the zero balance appear on my phone screen, my breath catching in my throat. I slept on a real mattress for the first time in years, not the lumpy futon I had kept since college. I bought a used car reliable enough to get me around without the constant fear of breaking down. But I kept the rest quiet. This was mine, and I wasn't going to let them take it from me. I began working on my plan, outlining a business model for a financial consulting firm specifically for women, especially single mothers who were rebuilding their lives after divorce or debt. I wanted them to know what I wished someone had told me. One Saturday morning, I was sitting in my new kitchen planning content for a workshop when my phone buzzed. Ryan's name flashed on the screen. "Hey Lauren," he said, his voice casual but sharp underneath. "You busy?" "A bit," I said, keeping my tone even. "You never come around anymore," he said. "Dad and Cheryl keep asking about you." "I've been working," I said. There was a pause, the quiet stretching. "Funny," he said. "I heard you moved. New car too. Must be doing well." I felt the hairs on my neck rise. "I've been saving for years, Ryan." He let out a low chuckle. "Yeah, sure." He hung up before I could respond. I set my phone down, my hands shaking. A few days later, I came home to find my mailbox open, papers scattered on the floor inside. I looked around the hallway, empty, the overhead light flickering. Inside, nothing was missing, but someone had clearly rifled through my mail. I found a flyer crumpled under the envelopes, my name written in thick black ink. I knew it was him. At work, Maya pulled me aside, her eyes searching my face. "Lauren," she said, lowering her voice. "What's going on with you?" "What do you mean?" I asked, forcing a smile. "You paid off your loans. You moved. You're different," she said. "Are you in trouble?" "No," I said quickly. She folded her arms. "Are you laundering money? Is someone using you to move cash?" I stepped back, shaking my head. "Maya, no. It's nothing like that." "Then tell me," she said, her voice cracking. "I'm your friend." I looked at her, seeing the fear and worry in her eyes. I wanted to tell her everything, to let her carry the secret with me, but the words caught in my throat. "I can't," I whispered. Her face fell and she nodded slowly. "Okay," she said. "But I'm here when you're ready." That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, the shadows from the streetlights dancing across the white paint. I thought about Grandma Alice, about the promise I made to use this money to help others. I pulled out the folder Harold gave me, flipping through the documents again, needing to remind myself that this was real, that it was mine. As I slid the papers back, a small envelope fell out, an old bank statement with a note in Grandma's handwriting. "Ask Harold about the withdrawals. Trust yourself." My heart pounded as I read it over and over, the words sinking in. Withdrawals. I opened my laptop, logging into the old accounts Grandma used to have at the local credit union. I checked the statements going back years. There in black and white were withdrawals signed under her name, amounts that didn't match the notes she kept in her books. My father's handwriting was messy but familiar. I closed the laptop, my hands cold, the reality pressing in. He had stolen from her, from me. And now Ryan was watching me, and I knew it was only a matter of time before the secret I carried would no longer be mine to protect. I spent the next few days in a haze, going to work, answering emails, meeting clients, while my mind spun with questions. Every time my phone buzzed, I jumped, half expecting it to be Ryan or my father. I knew I had to confront Harold. I needed to know if Grandma Alice knew about the stolen money, if she tried to stop it, if she left me more than just the inheritance to protect. I called his office, setting up a meeting for Friday afternoon. The receptionist's calm voice didn't match the storm inside me. That Friday, the sky was gray, the air heavy with the promise of rain. I parked in front of Harold's building, sitting in my car for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, forcing myself to take a breath. When I walked into his office, Harold looked up from his desk, his kind eyes studying me. "Lauren," he said, standing. "Have a seat." I sat, pulling out the envelope and placing it on the desk between us. "I found this," I said, my voice steady. "She told me to trust myself." Harold picked up the envelope, opening it, scanning the note, and then looking back at me. "She knew," he said softly. I swallowed my throat tight. She knew they were taking money. Harold nodded. She discovered it a few years ago. She confronted your father, but he denied it. She didn't want to press charges while she was alive. Why, I asked, my voice cracking. She didn't want the family to fall apart, he said, folding the paper and setting it down gently. But she left documentation. She wanted you to have the choice to press charges, I whispered. Yes, Harold said. Or to let it go. I looked down at my hands, the skin pale against the dark wood of the desk. My family had taken from her, and now Ryan was circling trying to find out about the money I had. Can I do it? I asked. Is it too late? No, Harold said. We can file a civil case for fraud and theft. The documents she left are strong evidence. I nodded, the weight of the choice heavy on my shoulders. As I left the office, the rain had started, soft and cold, soaking through my jacket as I walked to my car. I drove around for a while, letting the city lights blur through the raindrops on my windshield. I parked near Green Lake, the water dark, the air sharp and wet. I thought about Grandma, about her quiet strength, about the way she always told me to stand up for myself even when it hurt. My phone buzzed, and I looked down, seeing a text from Ryan. We need to talk, now. I didn't answer, sliding the phone into my pocket. I sat there, the rain tapping on the roof, the world outside, quiet, waiting. I knew I needed to protect what Grandma left me. I knew I needed to protect what I was building. But a part of me was afraid of what would happen if I took the next step. The next morning, I drove to the bank to handle paperwork for my business account, my mind spinning with the decision I had to make. As I stepped out of my car, I felt it. Someone was watching me. I turned, scanning the parking lot, my breath catching, when I saw Ryan's car parked a few rows back, his eyes on me, his phone in his hand. He stepped out, slamming the door, his expression tight, storming toward me as the rain started to fall harder. And at that moment, I knew my secret was about to be exposed. What would you have done if you were me? Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. Nothing is quieter than a dinner table when the truth finally comes out. I didn't want to go. I told myself it would be a mistake, but the text from Aunt Carol begging me to show up made me change my mind. It was a Saturday evening, the air sharp with the promise of rain, when I pulled up in front of Ryan's new house, the one he bought with the money from Grandma Alice's estate. The porch lights were on, warm and welcoming, but I could feel the tension in my chest as I walked up the steps. The door opened before I could knock. Ryan stood there, his eyes scanning me from head to toe, his jaw tight. Lauren, he said, forcing a smile. Come in. The living room was filled with the scent of roasted chicken and garlic bread, the table set with dishes that looked too fancy for a family gathering like this. Cheryl was there, fussing over the salad, her gold bracelets jingling as she moved. Dad sat in the recliner, the television muted but flashing images of a college football game. Aunt Carol was in the kitchen, helping Cheryl while stealing nervous glances at me. Hey, Lauren, Dad said, his voice casual, but his eyes didn't meet mine. Hi, Dad, I replied, taking off my coat, hanging it by the door. Dinner was served, plates passed around, glasses filled with sweet tea and cheap wine. The sound of forks against plates filled the room, the small talk forced, each word heavy with things left unsaid. Halfway through the meal, Ryan cleared his throat, leaning back in his chair, his eyes locked on mine. So, Lauren, he said loud enough that everyone stopped talking. You gonna tell us where the money came from? I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth, the chicken going cold on my plate. What money? I asked, keeping my voice calm. Don't play dumb, Ryan snapped. The new apartment. The new car. You paid off your loans. We know, Lauren. Cheryl's eyes widened, her lips parting, but she said nothing. Dad shifted in his seat, his jaw tightening. Gloria, sitting next to Dad, put her hand on her chest, her eyes filling with tears. Lauren, honey, she said, her voice trembling. We're just worried about you. If you're in trouble, we can help. I let out a small laugh, shaking my head. Help? Is that what you call it? Gloria's tears spilled over her mascara, smudging as she wiped her face. I'm your mother, she said, her voice rising. I just want what's best for you. You're not my mother, I said, my voice steady. And you never wanted what was best for me. You wanted what was best for you. Dad slammed his hand on the table, making the dishes rattle. Watch your mouth, he barked. We took care of you. We fed you, we put a roof over your head. I reached into my bag, pulling out the documents. Harold gave me the ones Grandma Alice left for me to find. I tossed them onto the table, the papers sliding across the wood, landing in front of Dad. She knew, I said, my voice low. She knew you were stealing from her. From me. The room went silent, the only sound the clock ticking on the wall. Dad's face turned red, his hand clenching around the papers. Don't you dare accuse me of that, he growled. It's not an accusation, I said, leaning forward. It's the truth. Gloria's sobs filled the room, Cheryl staring at her plate, Aunt Carol covering her mouth with her hand, tears in her eyes. Ryan stood his chair scraping against the floor. You think you're better than us now, he shouted. You think just because she left you something you get to judge us. I stood too, my hands flat on the table, meeting his glare. No, I said. But I'm done letting you all take from me. The room was heavy, the air thick, each person frozen in their seats. And in that silence, they all realized that I wasn't the same Lauren they thought they could control. Aunt Carol was the first to move, reaching out with a shaking hand to pick up the papers. She scanned the signatures, her eyes darting to Dad, her lips parting as she looked back at me. Is this true? She whispered. Dad's face twisted, his eyes flashing with anger as he grabbed the papers from her hand, crumpling them in his fist. None of your business, Carol, he snapped. It is her business. I said, my voice calm even as my hands trembled. Grandma trusted me with this because she knew you were stealing from her. Gloria let out another sob, dabbing her eyes with a napkin. We did what we had to do, she cried. You don't understand how hard it was. Don't you dare, I said, my voice rising. Don't you dare use that as an excuse. Ryan slammed his palm on the table, the plates rattling. Why can't you just let it go? He shouted. You have money now, don't you? Just let it go. I turned to him, locking eyes with him, seeing the fear hidden behind the anger. This was never about the money, I said. It's about what you did to her. To me. The silence that followed was heavy, the tension thick enough to taste. Cheryl stood, taking a step back, her eyes darting around the room. I didn't know, she whispered, shaking her head. I didn't know any of this. Dad glared at her, his mouth opening to say something, but he closed it, his jaw clenched. I took a deep breath, letting the anger settle in my chest like a stone. I came here because I wanted you to hear it from me, I said. I'm done being silent. Dad laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. And what are you going to do, Lauren? He spat. Take us to court. If I have to, I said, lifting my chin. I will. Gloria's crying turned into quiet whimpers, her shoulders shaking as she leaned into Dad. Ryan shook his head, pacing around the table, his hands on his hips. You think you're so righteous, he muttered. You think you're better than us. No, I said, looking at each of them, letting the silence hold. I just know I'm not like you. Aunt Carol wiped her tears, looking at me with a softness that made my chest tighten. Your grandmother would be proud of you, she said quietly. Dad scoffed, turning away, his face red, breathing hard. I think we're done here, I said, grabbing my bag, sliding the remaining documents back inside. As I turned to leave, Gloria reached for my arm, her eyes wide, desperate. Lauren, please, she begged. We're family. I looked down at her hand, then back at her, pulling my arm away. You should have remembered that when you stole from me, I said. I walked out of that house, the cold air hitting my face, the sound of the door shutting behind me echoing in the quiet night. The drive home was silent, the streets empty, the city lights blurry through the tears I refused to let fall. When I got home, I sat in the dark, the weight of the confrontation pressing on me, the fear of what would come next clawing at my chest. I thought it was over. But just a few days later, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but the voice on the other end was calm, professional. Miss Hill, this is Agent Reynolds with the IRS. I froze, the room spinning around me, the silence on the line heavy. We need to speak with you regarding your family's financial activities. I gripped the phone, my breath catching, realizing the truth I had fought to expose was now a storm none of us could escape. Have you ever been in a situation like this? Share in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. They thought they could laugh at me forever, but karma forgets no one. The call from the IRS was just the beginning. They had questions, and I had the documents to prove everything. The stolen withdrawals, the forged signatures, the unreported cash Grandma tried to send to help me pay for school. It didn't take long before the investigation widened. Henry and Gloria tried to act calm at first, but I heard from Aunt Carol that agents came to their house with questions about Grandma's accounts, about the property sale, about years of missing reports they thought no one would ever find. Ryan's name came up too. I didn't know everything he was doing, but I knew he was living bigger than he should, posting about new electronics, gambling trips, and a car he claimed was a business expense. One morning, I opened my email to see a news alert. Local man accused of insurance fraud. Ryan's mugshot was there, eyes hollow, hair messy, the arrogance strained from his face. The next day, he was gone. They said he left town in the middle of the night, leaving behind the mess he made, leaving Dad and Gloria to deal with the tax bills, the penalties, the liens placed on the house they thought was their safety net. They called me one evening, their number lighting up my phone as I sat at my kitchen table going over workshop plans for the nonprofit I was building. I let it ring, but something inside me told me to answer. Gloria's voice came through, small and shaking. I stayed silent. "Please, we need help," she cried. "The IRS says we owe back taxes, penalties. They're going to take the house." I closed my eyes, letting the words sink in, the pain in her voice real, but the memory of her lies sharper. Dad's voice cut in, rough and desperate. "You can fix this. You have the money." I opened my eyes, staring at the quiet apartment around me, the framed photo of Grandma Alice on the shelf, her small smile steady, reminding me of who I was. "No," I said, my voice calm. "I can't help you." Gloria sobbed. "We're family." "You should have remembered that when you stole from me," I replied. Dad's breathing was heavy, the silence on the line thick, before he finally spoke. "You're just like her," he said, venom in his voice. "I hope so," I said. I hung up, placing the phone down, my hands shaking, tears pressing at the corners of my eyes but refusing to fall. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the quiet of the room pressing in around me. Was this justice? Or was I just as broken as they were, hiding behind the money Grandma left me, pretending it could fix everything? Outside, the city moved on, cars passing, lights glowing in the darkness, the world reminding me that it was still turning even when everything felt like it was standing still. I got up, pulling out my laptop, opening the file for my nonprofit, the plans for financial literacy workshops, the grants for single mothers, the free consultations for women trying to escape financial abuse. If I couldn't save them, I would save others. I would use what Grandma gave me to help women like me, women who needed a chance to build something better, something no one could take away from them. I closed the laptop, taking a deep breath, letting the calm settle in my chest. But even as I tried to let it go, a question whispered in the back of my mind. Would I ever feel free, even as they finally faced the consequences they earned? The next morning, I walked into the small office I rented for the nonprofit, the smell of fresh coffee and paper grounding me as I turned on the lights. The walls were lined with whiteboards covered in plans, lists of women waiting for appointments, grant applications, workshop schedules. It was small, but it was mine. It was what Grandma would have wanted. Maya came in, balancing 2 coffees and her laptop bag, her eyes tired but determined. "I stayed up late drafting the pitch deck for the Women's Center partnership," she said, handing me a cup. "Thank you," I said, taking it, the warmth steadying my shaking hands. She studied my face, her eyebrows pulling together. "How are you?" she asked. I paused, the steam from the coffee rising between us. "I don't know," I admitted. She nodded, leaning against the desk, sipping her coffee. "Sometimes," she said, "justice doesn't feel as good as you think it will." I swallowed, blinking back the tightness in my chest. "I know," I whispered. That afternoon, a young woman named Elena came in for her appointment. She was 24, working 2 jobs, trying to leave a boyfriend who kept draining her bank account. She sat across from me, clutching her folder of bills, her eyes tired, her shoulders tense. "I don't know where to start," she said, her voice shaking. I took a breath, remembering the nights I sat alone in my apartment, bills piled on the counter, the fear of never escaping tightening around me like a rope. "We'll start together," I said. We went through her budget, made a plan to open her own account, steps to build her credit, how to apply for an education grant. By the end of the meeting, her eyes were wet, but she was smiling. "Thank you," she whispered, clutching the folder to her chest. As she left, I stood by the window watching her walk down the street, the weight in my chest easing for the first time in days. This was what the money was for. This was the mission Grandma left me. That evening, I stayed late working on a presentation for the local community center. I didn't notice the sun setting the office growing dark until the glow of the streetlights filtered through the blinds. I packed up my laptop, pulling on my coat, locking up before stepping into the cold night. The city was quiet, the sidewalks wet from the rain earlier, the air crisp against my face. I walked to my car, unlocking it, sliding into the driver's seat, letting out a long breath as I stared at the dark dashboard. My phone buzzed, lighting up with a text. "Unknown number, we need to talk. You know who this is?" I stared at the message, the weight of the past few months pressing into me, the fear I thought I had left behind, clawing at the edges of my calm. My hands tightened around the steering wheel as the city lights blurred outside my window. I didn't know what was coming next, but I knew it wasn't over yet. Have you ever been in a situation like this? Share in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. I learned that forgiveness isn't to let them rest. It's to let me be free. For weeks, I had been carrying the weight of anger, replaying every lie, every moment they laughed at me, every time they told me I wasn't enough. I let the bitterness sit in my chest, hoping it would protect me. But it didn't. I sat on my balcony one morning, the early Seattle fog rolling over the city, holding a cup of coffee as I watched the sunrise. The light broke through the clouds, washing the rooftops in gold. I closed my eyes, breathing in the cold air, letting the tension in my shoulders ease. My phone buzzed and I saw Maya's name. I hesitated before answering. "Hey," I said, my voice softer than I meant it to be. "Come by the cafe today," she said. "We need to talk." A few hours later, I walked into the cafe, the scent of espresso and baked goods wrapping around me like a blanket. Maya was already there, sitting in the corner, a notebook open in front of her. She looked up, her eyes meeting mine. "Sit," she said. I sat, folding my hands on the table, waiting. She took a deep breath. "I know you're hiding something. I don't want to push, but I want to help." I looked down at the table, tracing the grain of the wood with my finger. "It's a lot," I whispered. "Then let me help carry it," she said. So I told her everything. About Grandma, Alice, the inheritance, the stolen money, the IRS investigation, the nonprofit I started. Every piece of the story I had been holding alone spilled out as Maya listened, her eyes never leaving mine. When I finished, the cafe was quieter, the morning rush gone, the sounds of cups clinking and milk steaming in the background. Maya reached across the table, placing her hand over mine. "You've been carrying this alone for too long," she said. "Let me help." I blinked, tears burning in my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. "Will you help me run it?" I asked. "The nonprofit." She smiled, squeezing my hand. "Let's do it," she said. That afternoon I drove to the cemetery, a small bouquet of white lilies in my hand, the sky gray but clear. I stood in front of Grandma, Alice's grave, the cold breeze rustling the grass around me. "I did it, Grandma," I whispered, kneeling to place the flowers. "I kept my promise." I sat there for a while, letting the quiet fill me, letting her memory wrap around me like the softest comfort. When I stood, I felt lighter. Driving back, the city lights blinked on as the sky darkened, and I returned to my apartment, stepping onto the balcony, looking down at the lights of Seattle stretching into the distance. I closed my eyes, letting the cold wind hit my face, letting it carry away the fear, the anger, the guilt. This money wasn't just revenge. It was a promise to myself that I would never live small again. They laughed at me over a single dollar. They didn't know that single dollar was the greatest gift Grandma could have given me. Freedom. The first day in our new office, I stood by the window as Maya unpacked boxes, the early sunlight catching the dust dancing in the air. We had a small space downtown, nothing fancy, but it had big windows and room for a whiteboard, a conference table, and a coffee machine we found on sale. Maya placed a framed photo of her and her mother on her desk, then looked over at me. "You ready for this?" she asked. I nodded, taking a deep breath. "Yeah, I'm ready." Our nonprofit opened quietly, word spreading through women's shelters, churches, and local libraries. We offered free financial literacy classes, credit repair workshops, and one-on-one coaching for women rebuilding their lives. I met mothers leaving abusive marriages, young women drowning in medical debt, and women who had been told all their lives they weren't good enough to handle money. Every day, I saw them walk in scared and leave with their heads a little higher. One afternoon, I stayed late going over grant paperwork, the city lights of Seattle twinkling through the windows as the office grew quiet. Maya came out of the small kitchen, 2 mugs of tea in her hands. "Break time," she said, handing me one. I took it, wrapping my hands around the warmth, the steam curling into the cold air. "Thank you," I said. She sat across from me, pulling her knees up in the chair. "You ever think about them?" she asked quietly. I knew who she meant. "Yeah," I said, looking down into my tea. "Sometimes." "Do you regret it?" she asked. I thought about the phone calls, the tears, the anger in Dad's voice, the begging, the blaming. "No," I said. "They made their choices. And I made mine." She nodded, sipping her tea, the hum of the heater filling the silence between us. Later that week, I drove back to the cemetery. The lilies I brought last time now withered, the grass around the headstone damp with morning dew. I replaced them with fresh daisies, brushing the dirt from the carved letters of Grandma Alice's name. "Hi, Grandma," I whispered, sitting down on the grass. "It's working. The women are coming. We're helping them." The breeze was soft, the rustle of leaves above me like a quiet promise. "I'm okay," I said, closing my eyes. "I'm really okay." When I stood, I felt lighter, as if something had finally let go. That night, I stood on the balcony of the office, looking down at the city lights, letting the cold air wash over me. $3.5 million. It was never about the money. It was about the choice to live without fear. The choice to never ask for permission to live my life. They laughed at me over a single dollar. They never understood that dollar was freedom. I turned back to my office, locking up for the night, the quiet clicking of the door echoing down the empty hallway. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed. It was an email notification. Subject line: account update. I opened it, my breath catching as I read the first line. "Miss Hill, we are contacting you regarding an additional investment account your grandmother established in Zurich. She left a note for you. Are you ready?" Have you ever been in a situation like this? Share in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this.